My boyfriend has a work trip this upcoming week, so I'm gonna have the house all to myself, which sounds amazing because I can do nothing but read after work. And I decided to take it one step further and just completely terrorize myself by reading only horror books during this time, with nobody to protect me except for my dogs. So I'm going to do that. I'm starting this weekly reading vlog over the weekend when he is home, but he's gonna be busy with some other things, so I can focus on reading and doing all the weekend stuff. But during the work week, it's gonna be solo, only me. So I have some horror books picked out. I have an amazing TBR for options, and I wanna read as many as I can, and then at the end, I wanna rank these in terms of which scared me the most, from the least scary to the downright terrifying. So that's what I'm gonna do, and I'm gonna give myself some nightmares, and we'll see how this goes. This mouth breather here is helping me put my bookshelves together. Hi girl, hello. Bless you. I updated my bookshelf here for the month of May. I have some of my regulars, but then I also am highlighting the books that I'm going to be reading this month, or the hopefuls. And in particular, right here, I have my horror shelf. So this is my TBR for the week. These are the options that I have for myself. Please comment down below if you have any favorites from this pile here, because I am dying to know. I am not too proud to admit that under the bed is like the scariest place ever. So here we have in chapter 4 a flashback to when she's 11 years old, and there is something under her bed. Ah! That's scary. What do you mean the house is never gonna let her leave? I have questions. As someone who wakes up several times at night to take their senior dog outside to go potty, this is terrifying. She's waking up in the middle of the night and she steps on something crunchy and the floor seems to be moving. This will live rent-free in my head. Okay, so the chances of a thunderstorm on this solo week are pretty slim to none, but the wind is certainly picking up. There's a wind advisory. So I'm out in my garden, and T. Kingfisher has me scared of my own damn garden. But I am out here because I am here to pick some cilantro and some kale for my dinner tonight. So I am facing my fears that I'd never had before, but T. Kingfisher gave me, so that I can get some stuff for dinner. There's no roses though. Roses are the key creepy thing in T. Kingfisher's world. So hopefully I will be okay. I'm back to talk about the horror books that I read during this weekly reading vlog. I'm going to rank them from the somewhat creepy to the downright terrifying while I was home by myself during that week. And I also have an award to give each of the books. Now, this vlog took a little bit of a real-life horror spin. You probably don't notice, but throughout the footage, it gets shorter and shorter for each day, and you don't really see me or my face or anything, and that's because during this solo week, I actually had to say goodbye to my dog, my German Shepherd. So it was a really, really tough week. Not what I was expecting. I was expecting like a really fun reading horror books, and it was horrible. But it's actually been about a week since that happened, and I'm finally able to try to have a little bit more fun and reflect on some of these books. So let's go ahead and get started. First, I want to talk about the DNF that I had during the week. And unfortunately, that was The Only Good Indians. And I say unfortunately because in a book haul video and a TBR video, I got lots of comments saying that people loved this book, and I have heard that it is downright terrifying. So this would have been perfect during this week while I was reading horror books home alone, but I got about a quarter of the way through the book. What I gathered from that is that someone was being haunted by a hunting accident, like a really weird hunting incident where the elk, was it an elk or moose or something, did not die gracefully. And that was a little bit difficult, but what made me close the book is that there was a situation with his dog where it was leashed in the backyard and tried to jump the fence, and it hung itself. And obviously, given what I was going through that week, I couldn't do it. So I had to put it down, and I'd like to say I'll pick it back up. But honestly, that scene will probably always remind me of this past week I had. I don't know if I'll ever be able to pick it back up, but never say never. Just right now, I couldn't handle reading this. Okay, I've been a little bit of a bummer up to this point. Sorry, not sorry. I'm just going through it. But now we're gonna have a little bit more fun with the books, because the least scary book that I did finish was Confessions. And it's not that this like wasn't scary or disturbing. It's just that this is more of a thriller rather than a horror. Of the books that I read for this reading vlog, this was the most intelligent. It had to do with the writing style, I think, in particular. So in Confessions, we have a middle school teacher who is sitting her class down for what she says is the last time because she is going to retire. She is telling them that, as they all know, her 5-year-old daughter died about a month ago on the school grounds by drowning in the pool. However, she knows that there are 2 students in that class that are actually responsible for her death, and she is going to get back at them. Now, the way she tells the whole class that she's getting back at them is just so diabolical. And I love the element too of how the class kind of has their own social justice for these students. So it was really interesting. And then each chapter in this book follows a different character and their perspective, both on the events leading up to this moment, but also the events after this moment. So we get different perspectives from different characters to tell this story and fully flesh it out. And it was just, as I said, the most intelligent. I love the way that these students suffered for what they did, but also their perspective on things was just so interesting. This is a must read. Next up, for the most terrifying book I read, was The Patient, and this wins the award for the most imaginative book I read that week. This horror book kind of reminds me of the thriller The Silent Patient, in that we have a therapist who is working at an asylum, and he wants to take on the most incurable patient that they have and see if he can crack the case. As he's learning about this patient, he finds out that every previous doctor that has tried to treat him has gone insane and unalived themselves. So not really a good track record. And he's telling the director of the asylum that he wants to work with this patient, and she asks him, "What are you most afraid of?" Because that's going to be very important going into this. This wins the award for most imaginative due to everything that happens, especially in such a short book, but it is lower on the scary scale because I'm not planning on going to a mental hospital anytime soon or an asylum to try and treat patients. So this was interesting and scary, but didn't really impact me personally while I was home alone, where it would like scare me, you know. But the ending was super fantastic, and the ending, my ring light just decided to stop working, so we adjusted the angle here, but it kind of works because we have the books that we've already discussed right here so you can see them. As I was saying about The Patient, the ending was fantastic. The ending in this book is what makes it particularly disturbing. I really enjoyed it. Next, we have the manga Frankenstein, and this one I label as the grossest of the horror books that I read, and it's higher on the scary scale because this is like a collection of short stories, kind of like the true Frankenstein tale is the first one, but then it goes beyond that to some other stories. And there is an element of a kid who lives by himself because his parents are working abroad, and creepy things happen in his house with an alternate dimension and things in his walls and like noises within his walls. And so that was kind of scary reading while home alone, and it's gross because the pictures in this, like the art, is why I love Junji Ito. He is just so creative and disturbed and amazing, so I really enjoyed this, and it was pretty creepy to read this week. Even scarier than that Frankenstein collection was A House with Good Bones by T. Kingfisher. I picked this up because I love this author. She is quickly becoming one of my favorite authors. She is very, very skilled. And this horror book I labeled as the coziest horror. But that doesn't mean it wasn't scary to read when I was home alone. This is about a 32-year-old woman who is going back to her childhood home to check on her mother. Her brother has said that he's a little bit concerned with her status, I guess. And so when she goes to see her mom is very jumpy and forgetful and just not quite right. So she doesn't know what's wrong with her. Is it a stalker? Is it grief from losing her own mother? Is it dementia? She doesn't know, but she's trying to figure it out. Now this one was a little bit scarier to read this week when I was home alone because creepy things happened to her when she was sleeping. And that's the thing, like that's something that will always get me, is things that are happening when you're asleep or under the bed things. And I showed you that scene where she got up out of bed in the middle of the night and the floor was moving and it was like crunching under her feet. It was of the insect variety, I'll tell you that. So that was really scary and creepy for me. I was thinking about that when I was like going to sleep at night. So this got in my head. I labeled this as the coziest horror because, true to T. Kingfisher's writing style, her main character is incredibly sarcastic, so it gives you a little bit of comedic relief while you're going through some of these creepy things, and things just turn weird. That seems to be like the formula for her horror books, which I'm not mad at, but it's really creepy, and then the why and like the climax of the story was just strange, and that definitely held true here, but I really enjoyed it. I love that blend of sarcasm and horror. Now it's time for the runner-up to the scariest book that I read the week that I was home alone, and that is Road of Bones. Now, this one I bought purely because of the cover. I was seeing it all over the place, and this cover was just calling to me, so I didn't know anything about it. But I will tell you right now that this book wins for the most ominous, creepy setting. This is about a film crew who is looking to film a documentary or a reality show about the coldest place on Earth. So we are in a very remote area in Siberia, very cold, and it's creepy and ominous because everybody is just one car breakdown away from freezing to death. And it's called Road of Bones because the legends say that this road is built on the bones of people that have died in the area and they just couldn't recover the bodies. So very scary setting. I mean, I'm not planning on going to Siberia anytime soon, so it's like a good kind of horror. It didn't really scare me while I was home alone. Like, it's not like a haunted house type story or anything that I feel like is gonna come out and get me, but I did really love this setting a lot. And they're on this road trip, things are going on, you know, they're wanting to film this documentary, and they stumble into this very small town that has been completely abandoned. And I mean very suddenly and very recently. I think there's still like dinner on the table, but they find one little girl alone in this town. I don't know what it is, what it says about me, that I find like a single small child, particularly like a little girl, to be so terrifying. But I do. I think of like the Shining twins in the movie, and yeah, creepy. I don't want to spoil this for you by discussing the plot that much further, but I will say from that point on, it gets pretty fast paced. And I was talking to the Booktube channel Bex Reads about this book. We buddy read this together, and she actually had a lot of insightful information about like the legends in which this came from, and that was really interesting. She gave me like a lot of different perspective on it, and the why, like how this is kind of like a retelling of a legend, and I had no idea because I went into it blind. So it was fantastic to buddy read this with her. I don't want to steal her thunder if she's going to talk more about that in her videos, but that was really interesting perspective, although we both felt like the ending got pretty strange and we did not like the conclusion of it. I think we were both aligned that we had some open questions about good and evil, and it was kind of an ambiguous ending, which I did not enjoy in this one. I mean, one of these other ones also has an ambiguous ending, but I really liked it. It really worked. So I don't know if I can say I always hate an ambiguous ending, but this one, the ending did not do it for me. But the isolated setting and that cold atmosphere was really cool to read about. So that means only one book can remain that holds the title of the scariest book I read when I was home alone during the week, and that book is Just Like Home. In this book, Vera is returning to her childhood home to be by the side of her estranged, dying mother. And going home holds a whole bunch of different complications for Vera because it was the scene of a huge tragedy. You see, her father was a serial killer who liked to torture people in the basement. Yeah. And yeah, he went to prison for it. It was kind of a big deal, kind of like really in the news, so everyone knows who Vera is. nobody in the town likes her because she's part of this family that did horrible, horrible things. So she's having a tough time, like being back in the town and then hanging out with her mom, like out of duty and obligation rather than actual love, because she doesn't really get along with her mother. And there are some elements in the house that are creepy beyond that. So there are some supernatural things that seem to be going on, and particularly they seem to be centered under her bed, which, okay, I already said that things happening while you're sleeping is like the scariest thing you could read when you're home alone. But under the bed stuff, like, that has to be like one of my top fears unlocked. I think I've always known it, but like reading this, it was really terrifying, the under the bed element. And like something was like petting her hair while she was sleeping, and it was just so creepy. This one has everything I'm looking for in a horror book, and it was made even better to give me the creepy vibe I was looking for while I was home alone. So I mentioned the home alone aspect, but I also mentioned this kind of like family tragedy mystery that added a lot to it. And then there was so much intelligence in this with the twists that occurred and the very intelligent ending that I really enjoyed. I like when things aren't done necessarily for shock value. I like when there's a point or a purpose, even if it's ambiguous in some cases, as long as I feel like it's done with intelligence and not just due to writer's block, like they didn't know what else to do. So this one really had it all. It had that intelligence, it had that fear factor, it had that mysterious element and this strange twisted history. I really liked Just Like Home, and it was made even better reading it when I was home alone. I cannot believe that I was able to read 7 books in 1 week. I don't know if that is a precedent my boyfriend wants to set for me, because I might be more excited when he goes out of town because I can read so much. But I was pretty terrified, so now that he's home, I'm pretty happy. Thank you so much for hanging out with me in this weekly reading vlog. I will see you in the next video.